fund and has worked with the community-based contracting methodology for the last 10 years. So we welcome Mrs. Hudson Reid.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. But first, I need to get that round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay. Empowering communities through community-based contracting. And I am doing a presentation, but you might find that I might ask one or two questions. That is within me to do so because I want to test if you're listening. Is that okay? Is that okay? All right. What is community-based contracting? I'm not asking a question now, I want you to think about it. All right? So, community-based contracting is an implementation model which seeks to enhance community capacity, governance structures, and project ownership by allowing communities to take control of their project. Right? The community group is accountable for the execution of the project, has control over all the resources from the community, and are responsible for procurement of materials, the entire project management of the project, all right? We at JSIF provides the relevant training, we monitor the project, and provide ongoing monitoring right through it, start to finish. This model represents a bottom-up approach to community development, okay? What is the process? Assessing the group's organizational effectiveness using an internal social appraisal tool. We assess the group's legal and representative status. The project management committee, selected through a transparent process which removes the feelings of animosity that may arise from the wider community. Would you agree? Because we do have that sometimes, right? We sign what is known as a financial agreement, and that governs the project. It is a Bible to the project, right? The community contributes to at least 10% of the total project cost in sweat equity, sometimes going far, far beyond that 10%. Prerequisites for success. There is an organized CBO, community-based organization. Various levels of training ongoing. Training, project management, procurement, accounting, bookkeeping, report writing, financial, and management skills. We utilize the workers. We have an employment data bank where the project management team will know the skill set within their community, and we will utilize those persons. So we don't bring external persons to work in a community on the community project. We utilize the skill sets that are within these communities. And we know in order to succeed anywhere, willingness of a community to actively participate in their own development. We have to have that mindset, all right? Agree? Okay. Now, there are several methodologies that we use within the community-based contracting scope. There are 3 of them. 1, this is where the project management team And the project management team are a set of people with defined roles, right? So you have president through to the PRO going beyond that members, right? So they are responsible for all phases of the project. So model one, the team, the project management team, hires the laborers, purchases the material, and responsible from day one to the ending of all activities happening on their project. And model two, the PMC again will hire a contractor or a supervisor, while the supervisor or the contractor doing the work, the project management team is responsible for the laborers. And that is where they will get from the data bank that they would have provided at the beginning of the project. And again, they're responsible for the project implementation. Now, model three, which is one of the easiest models to work with, is where the contractor, the supervisor comes in. They do all the work. They hire the laborers. They come in with the material. So the procurement aspect of that project is somewhat lessened, while the project management team will do the reporting. So you are seeing the differences with the three different models, right? You are? Which one you like best? Number three, where there's less work. A lot of our communities like that too, but there are those who have the capacity and have shown us that they're fully responsible and they can manage the model one and the model two. Types of projects include small infrastructure projects, right? You're seeing there the building of a enclosure, right? That was done by a community group using the model one. Composting unit, and we have several soft projects, youth and education and recreational programs, and alternative livelihood skills development program that we utilize using the community-based contracting methodology. Okay? What is the benefit? And I'm happy that David alluded to this in his presentation. Employment creation, short-term employment, right? The community receives benefits from being employed. There are economic activities. Community businesses earn through providing goods and services to the project. So everything is within the community. It's very rare that we'll go out, that the project management team will go out and have to get something that is not within the community. Human capital development. The community group learns new skills, which further enhance their leadership qualities. Would you agree? Okay, we'll have to, all right? Evidence of success. We find that groups with multiple exposures to the procedures have shown measurable improvement in using the skills and competencies. How so? Groups would have gone after our intervention to partner to go out and get other fundings through the USAID, EFJ, Chase, Digital Foundations, to name a few. So they don't stop there with their project. They go out and they seek more projects for the development of their community. All right? So capacity would have soon been built that way. And we see this through empowerment. If the community group has been given the sole authority to implement its project from start to finish and manage it successfully, success can also ensure the credibility of the community's leadership, which is guaranteed. Agree? Okay. We see also that we would have been Building capacity in relevant skills area, right? Human resources are strengthened. The community obtains leadership skills as well as practical management, procurement, accounting, and bookkeeping skills. Writing financial proposals and building and enhancing their management skills in some way. Project savings. When you give funding to a community and they implement that project within the project scope and amount and save from it, that is a big accomplishment, because it would have shown that you manage, and not only manage, but you manage successfully. There are savings, and you as the group, the community head group, wants to do more. So that saving is achieved, and you do more community work to enhance the community development. All right? Partnerships. We can't do it alone. So you would have heard Mr. Spence speaking to SDC, David speaking to the DCFS, the DCFS, the SDC, and other agencies of government, NGOs, etc., etc. There's a big partnership going on there. You know where the SD comes in and build these groups, then the departments of cooperatives and friendly society comes in and regulate, and we work with these groups. So there's a lot of us working together to achieve. Community-based contracting is a powerful tool for the community development. Why so? All right? I'm not going to let you tell me, but I'm going to tell you, all right? Mainly because benefits that are accrued at both the community and individual levels, community governance structures are strengthened. Social capital is increased for all persons living in the area. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Hudson Reid. I hear questions, but can we just hold the questions till we have our panel discussion? So write them down, don't forget them, because remember, you're an important part of this process. So we have had our 3 presentations, and I might say that they were very enlightening. Do you agree? Yes. And really highlight some of the best practices that we're seeing at the community level. So I've noted the importance of that enabling framework. So they spoke to the legislation and how important that is in creating that framework at the community level for them to operate at all levels. The importance of capacity building that was highlighted. The need for harmonious planning. Right? So although there are systems in place, they highlighted that there was need for more harmonious planning process. The streamlining of funding was also highlighted as important, and partnerships. And all 3 speakers spoke to the importance of partnerships and them not doing it alone. So whatever level you're working at within the community, for the community, you need to have those effective partnerships. Thank you very much. Please do not go very far. So we invite you to sit at the front. We're going to invite our panelists to come forward. And we're going to have a conversation around these issues. So Mr. Clive Edwards, who is a project manager for the Local Government Reform Unit, Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. And And we have coming forward also Mrs. Unicie Delapenha, Senior Governance Officer with the Citizen Security and Justice Program. And we will have our conversations, and then you'll be invited to provide your comments and feedback. Only one mic. Okay, so we invite Mrs. Delapenha, yes, for you to give your remarks. You can stay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. It has been a good, interesting session so far. I was tasked with the task to look at these questions. What is the current organizational paradigm that exists at the community level? What do you see? Speaking from the perspective of Citizen Security and Justice Program, the structure that exists, the paradigm that exists at the community levels varies. There's some structured organization, and there's some informal organizations. There's some strong community spirit, and there's some weak ones. Volunteerism is lacking in some area, and it's good in some area. So we must applaud the community leaders who have taken all the time to work with these groups, and we must applaud the Social Development Commission, which starts with a mandate to establish community groups. From CSJP perspective, we have identified the gaps, and the program have identified the gaps and tried to work in areas of institutional capacity. Let me hope that somewhat give you an overview of what is happening on the ground. The second question is we heard of two organizational structures, as you heard them presenting today. That's the Fletcher's Land and the Trench Town. We say some are working and some are not working. The two ideal structures presented today are what we're looking forward to as the structures that should exist. Yes, they do exist in these two communities. For some communities, they establish themselves using that structure based on what's happening on the ground. Critical sometimes that they shift for one reason or the other. Why? We have to face the reality that the persons we work with on the ground, there are a lot of challenges and there are a lot of reasons why. Even the agencies sometimes, who, even though we meet at an international agency, and we said we meet as coordinators, and we decided, okay, this is what exists. Out there, the reality exists. Each agency has their own mandate. As a result of that, they impacted on the structure that is on the ground. So some structures, basically the CBOs, from SDC perspective, is they come together and they form what we call a umbrella group. Umbrella group is what we call a CDC, a Community Development Committee. From there, they're being legalized through the Department of Cooperatives and Friendly Societies, and some to the Registrar of Companies. It's sort of difficult sometimes for them to maintain their status. As a result of that, we have some of the organizations become dormant, some become fragmented for many different reasons, which we'll continue discussion as the question goes by. So the ideal situation that we expect is a structured formal organization that develop out of a community vision. One of the speakers spoke earlier, alluded to the fact that some of these groups are formed through projects. Project as a start date and the end date. What do we do afterward? The groups are there and they face different challenges, and it's not guided by the mandate of the SDC and other agencies working to build these structures, then they fall apart for many different reasons.
Yes, Mrs. Delapenha.
As agencies?
Yeah. So I just invite Mr. Edwards to speak from the context of the Ministry of Local Government on that community structure that Mrs. Delapenha and the persons who spoke earlier alluded to, from the perspective of the ministry, sir.
Thank you, moderator. On the basis of the discussion we've been having, I would want to float our discussion in the context of what the role of the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development is and what it does via the Local Government Reform Unit. And our task is to, through a transformation process which is citizen-centered, work with stakeholders, both at the central and the local level, in ensuring that the tools and the conditions are created that communities can have a higher degree and a greater experience of local self-management. And we've done this through, let's look at a stool that has 4 legs. We looked at fiscal decentralization, because we've got to be honest with the adage that finance follows function. You don't give agencies something to do and you don't finance them effectively or resource them effectively. Look at the issue of legal. The legal framework has to be created to allow local authorities and local stakeholders to have the capacity within the law to do what has to be done, to be accountable. We look at the issue of the civil society mechanisms, which we're particularly interested in this morning. And we focused on trying to build participation mechanisms through the work of our agency, the Social Development Commission. Our task at the ministry is to create the policy framework and the legal framework. SDC implements. So for example, in our new Local Governance Act, we speak very clearly of the role and the legal recognition of the PDCs, the DACs, the CDCs, as participatory mechanisms with which the local authorities must collaborate as they go forward. The Local Government Finance Act speaks that you cannot present a budget for approval unless you have had proof that consultation with the citizens has taken place. You can't have effective consultation with the citizens if you haven't got organizational structures that allow you to be effectively mobilizing people and opinions. And in respect of the SDC is listed in the Local Governance Act as the registrar for the first time with legal responsibilities for building and working with community organizations. So in terms of the legal framework, we have sought to ensure that this exists. And one of the best ways to ensure that community groups are sustainable is if you have the proper resource and the oversight mechanism that allows them to be supported, be resourced, and be organized in a very structured way.
Good. All right. So we heard from the member, Mr. Allen, who spoke on the Fletcher's Land model, and from the Trenchtown model, that as much as possible, they try to pull in the CDCs in an umbrella organization. I wanted to ask both my 3 presenters, where are they? Yes, I told you not to go too far. And my panelists, how do you see parallel structures developing at the community level? And for these parallel structures, are you seeing them as competing for community resources, or are you seeing them as flowing into the process and actually aiding in development? So is it problematic? Is it enabling?
Sometimes it can be problematic and sometimes it can enabling. For instance, you'll have to look at the resources that are going in the community. Why are these resources going on? What is the mandate of the agencies and what are the needs of the organization? So you first have to do an assessment to determine whether it's problematic or it's enabling. So we assess the communities, and working with the communities, we look at their visions, their action plans, and to see how these resources can be channeled in the right direction.
Okay.
I would comment that the major opportunity that exists is that there's an awareness There's no question about it. There's an awareness of the importance and the vital strategic location of communities. For us to have a strong national framework, we have to have strong communities, and we have to build from the community base upwards. So that's positive, and that awareness has been expressed. That's why we're here. It's been expressed in many other ways. We have international partners that are always supporting us to do the work. The threat is that in our enthusiasm to get the work done, we very often set up duplicate structures in the system. We set up different agendas depending on what our funding needs are. And in the process, you in fact duplicate, overlap, and sometimes dilute.
Right.
So I think it's important from our perspective, the role of SDC being named in the Act as registrar, that all parties understand that role, and SDC is seen as the glue that can always get all the parties together to ensure that we use our resources smartly and that we're not running over each other in our enthusiasm to get things done. And the enthusiasm is two ways, because the beneficiaries are also enthusiastic and anxious to get benefits and get resolutions.
Yes. Yes.
It's an important development with the SDC being named registrar, because in my presentation I talk about what supersedes each other. Otherwise, you have the great difficulty. Well, the other issue is, let's say, the political will to accept the process so that the local authorities buy into the process, as well as the central government with the member of parliament. So you're not seen as removing resources that usually was controlled by the councillor or the member of parliament, but drilling down the process to get the community participation.
Good. Yes.
And that's a work in progress, as you would appreciate. One thing we haven't said enough is how difficult the process is. Let us not underestimate how difficult the process is. We are seeking to have parties and stakeholders act differently from the way they're used to acting. Our culture has our elected officials as doing things for their constituents. In many ways, our culture has our society is waiting for benefits from and through the elected official system. So we are changing that in the process, a paradigm we're seeking to change. So the process is challenging, but the work is begun. SDCs have been a very important part of that work. We have consultations frequently. The PDCs are seeking to establish a collaborative relationship with local authorities. Most of the committees in local authorities now have representatives from civil society who sit on these committees. So the dialogue has begun. There are some parishes that are great examples of how far we have reached. Other parishes, we need some more work.
Yes. All right. I wanted some comments from the Fletcher's Land experience.
So, yeah, so the resources exist and so forth, but they're sometimes detached from the very local level. So that's why I was saying that the Act can help to organize things. If for example, you will have 3-4 agencies have funding to do with sports, I think, or behavior modification, or one other matter. The funding needs to be one place, and it allows the different agencies to know and operate at that one space. And at the same time, it provides the very local community to be able to access, because that is important to know. If we're going to be doing community development, it must mean that the local people are the ones that are driving it. And this direction that the government is going has to include the very local people and their discourse as well. And I don't see where they are very much connected at times. And so that's why I made reference to the Act, because PDC is not required to talk to the DAC, or it's not required. There's nothing that says that we must collaborate or we must work in that way. It's just, in my mind at least, so it's just in theory that these things exist, and maybe for a greater good it makes perfect sense. But if it's entrenched somewhere that says that this is how the communication has to go, and the resources are accessed, then I think there should be some equilibrium among all the parties.
That's an important point, but we must also remember that laws don't always change behavior, but it's a good point to begin. The regulations, the new regulations in respect to the Governance Act are currently being worked on. We have regulations based on the old laws that are saved, but the new regulations are still to be completed. And the role of the registrar and the regulations that support the role of the registrar could be, in fact, be informed by such a suggestion.
Good. And I was particularly interested in, too, the mechanism that feeds up to the Parish Development Committee and how effective this has been. You said that there are parishes that have shown some success and there are gaps. What are some of the successes that we've been seeing?
Speaking of legislative and the CDC, we have what SDC has the structure in place. So you have the CDC, you have the DAC, and you have the PDC. You have an interagency meeting that is held for some communities or for some parishes. It's a monthly meeting, while some varies. What we used to need to use to set the platform of this interagency meeting, the Security and Justice Program and the SDC have developed what we call community profiles and plans. Within these plans and profiles, there are action plans which have been created community-based organization. These plans and profiles, action plans, are discussed at these interagencies. And it is critical, as we said, that these things are done at the community level. It is the community persons who sit along with other agencies and stakeholders to put together. When we are looking at our programs and our projects, it is very critical that these actions are taken into consideration. So that's what is done. That's what is discussed at interagencies that bring us here today, and we're hoping that will continue at this level.
Yes, and of course that will do good in terms of the long-term planning model that we want, if it is that we can sustain these particular systems. All right, so we have a system of local government reform and those 3 strategic acts that we have been talking about for, it was since 2003, it may get old enough, but yes, it has been a while that we've been talking about them and what it is that they're able to do. What is it that you see as the role of this local government reform and how it might help with some of the issues that have been highlighted?
Local government reform is a process, and I don't say that because I'm hoping that I can continue having a job. Because that's not going to happen. I will be off the scene in another year or so. But the point is that it's a process and it's ongoing. For example, if I tell you that the reason why the local government authorities have a dedicated fund that's dedicated to their operations, which is the Prerequisite Revenue Fund, is because of local government reform, and that was done several years ago. So there have been various things that have happened along the way. So that process continues. The key thing is to understand the context, because we started out in respect of a policy.
Right.
So we had Ministry Paper 893 and then 703, and that set the policy stage. Then we moved into the consultation phase, and the National Advisory Council on Local Government Reform was a highly broad-based council that had the political parties, labor, had academia, youth, women groups. It was very broad-based, and they came out with their interim report in 2007, which went to Parliament, to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament, and then a final report in 2009. And the unit, local government reform unit, has as priorities the recommendations that came out of that Joint Select Committee as priorities to take place. So the third phase would have been what we call organizational arrangements. So the legal work, the constitutional amendment, the 3 strategic laws, the National Building Bill, which was passed in Parliament last week. Those are priority areas that have impacted the legal framework. New organizational arrangements are necessary because you're looking at the capacity of a new type of local government.
Right.
PricewaterhouseCoopers was commissioned and they did an organizational review of the system. And we're now working, it's been taking us longer than we had anticipated, with the CMDB, that's the division, the Ministry of Finance, that has the authority and responsibility to implement public sector organizational change. So that is underway. And the most difficult part we're approaching now is the institutional part. How do you institutionalize reform? How do you transform at the institutional level the things that you want to get done? And so the areas of service delivery, you probably have heard of the Amanda process, for example, the National Building Bill, which seeks to deal with the whole development approval process, the 90-day window that we're looking at. Those areas are being worked on as I speak. The Local Economic Development Initiative, last week, the Clarendon Municipal Corporation launched their Mapen business district in collaboration with the private sector. Those issues are happening as we speak in the different areas. So that's the phase that it's going to take longer.
Slowly, yeah.
It's going to be less exciting. It's going to be harder work to have transformation at that level. But that's where the reform process has begun, the institutional, how do you institutionalize what you have, the tools